meeting number 32 of the House of Commons Standing Committee. Today's meeting is webcast and is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to House Order January 25th, 21. I have received a meeting request pursuant to 1064. The committee is meeting today to deal with some other issues, but specifically as well, I've added on 1064 as requested by 4 members of the committee to discuss their request to undertake a study of the countervailing and anti-dumping duties on the imports of Canadian softwood lumber by the United States. Ms. Gray, you have the floor to speak, to move the motion and to speak to it, please.
Great. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. The motion I'm moving today, I believe, is of importance on an issue which could have significant implications on the Canadian forestry sector, which, as we know, employs hundreds of thousands of Canadians across the country, with it being particularly significant in regions like British Columbia, Quebec, and the Atlantic. The U.S. Department of Commerce's preliminary determination on new combined tariff rates mean the tariffs will be doubled across the board on Canadian softwood exports if it comes into place. Therefore, this motion is quite timely so that we can hear from Minister Ng and our officials on the plan to address this issue with their U.S. counterparts and stakeholders so that these preliminary determinations do not become final and become the newly enforced rates. So I hope that all members of this committee will be supportive of this motion, and therefore I move, pursuant to Standing Order 1064, that the committee hold a meeting to invite the Minister of Small Business, Export Promotion and International Trade and relevant government officials to discuss the United States Department of Commerce's preliminary determinations increasing duties on Canadian softwood lumber exports from 8.99% to 18.32%, and that the meeting be at least 2 hours in length and that the Minister appear for no fewer than 1 hour and that appropriate government officials appear no fewer than 2 hours, and that this meeting occur no later than June 4th, 2021. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Are there any comments or discussion on the motion? Yes, Mr. Savard-Tremblay.
Yes, hello, and thank you, Madam Chair. I had the opportunity to talk to Ms. Gray in recent days. As I had stated, I agree with the idea that we could receive the representatives of the government to discuss this issue. Softwood lumber is a fundamental issue. Nevertheless, I would like to ask her a question because I have thought it over after our conversation on the topic. Why not recommend instead to the Special Committee on Canada-U.S. Relations? The motion itself mentions that softwood lumber will be one of their topics of study and that they specifically created it in order to be able to, assuming that we would be able to deal with all the issues here.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
you?
Yes.
Okay, I wasn't sure if you were recognizing me. Thank you very much to my honorable member for his colleague. For his question. This is the International Trade Committee, and even though the Canada-U.S. Committee can deal with a whole number of issues relating to the U.S., it doesn't preclude this committee from dealing with trade issues with the U.S. It is part of our overall mandate. And following the appearance of the minister and the officials, that committee perhaps could, they could choose to do a more wholesome study on this if that's something that they choose. They do have other work, I know, that's planned, right now with Buy America and Line 5 and other things. So that's their priority. So, they could choose to do that, but as the Trade Committee, with the U.S. as our largest trading partner, this is fully within something that we could request.
Thank you, Ms. Gray. Mr. Hoback.
Chair, unfortunately, I'm having some internet problems, so I'm going to leave my screen off. But one of the reasons I think it's very important that this committee deal with it is the special committee doesn't have it meets once a week and it's already has a full agenda with Buy America. It's not something that I don't think we wouldn't want to look at. I just don't think we would have time to appropriately look at it before we break for the summer. And I think we need to have some things discussed before that happens. So this is the right place it should happen. This is where it happened last time when we seen these tariffs come forward. And this is what the committee that actually created a strategy to try to get these tariffs removed. And so when you look at the way it impacts Canada, from Atlantic Canada to Quebec, Saskatchewan, Alberta, British Columbia, this is a huge issue, and I think this is the place to do it.
Thank you, Mr. Hoback. Mr. Raya. Mr. Raya, you're on mute.
Okay, Madam Chair, I apologize. I understand the softwood lumber issue is very important for many parts of Canada, and I think there are many implications of what's happening there. At the same time, we also have U.S. has formally requested a dispute settlement panel on the allegations that American products, that's on the dairy sector. So those sort of things also keep coming up, and New Zealand, though they have not formally complained, but they too have got some problems with the dairy agreement where the quotas are not being utilized. So there are various aspects that comes to it. I would like to hear more on this.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there any further discussion? Okay, I don't see any further discussion. Ms. Bendayan.
Yes, Madam Chair, sorry. I did just want to reiterate that we do also, everybody is talking about the full schedules that other committees might have. And here at CIIT, we also have important studies before us, including the motion from our colleague from the Bloc Québécois, sorry, not the motion, but rather the reference from the House of Commons on the private members bill of the Bloc Québécois. Alors, je voulais simplement aussi rajouter.
So I just wanted to add in the discussion the fact that we have 216 that was referred to our committee, and that we also are busy with other priorities. And I understand very much the interest of examining the situation concerning softwood lumber, but we also have something to deal with that is very important, which is Bill 216. So I don't know if my colleague from the bloc would like to also add a few words on that. He seems to have raised his hand. Yes, let Ms. Gray answer. And Mr. Dalton raised his hand. I might have a motion to make following the speakers in order to break the impasse.
Okay, Ms. Gray.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. I mean, certainly we could be prepared to have an additional meeting. We would be prepared to have an additional meeting, and also I don't believe you've scheduled everything right through to the end of the session yet. So you know, you can certainly as the chair look at that, but we'd be prepared to have an additional meeting if that's required, so that it doesn't hold up any other work that we're supposed to be doing.
Okay, thank you. I see Mr. Dalton. Is Mr. Hoback still with us, or is he gone? So Mr. Dalton, you have the floor.
Thank you. No, I just want to add my voice in support of this the motion. This is you know, it's a very impactful. You know, the tariff can have a tremendous impact. The previous one already has. It's closed so many mills, for example, in British Columbia and throughout Canada. And I think that the attention, the focus on this would be could be add some light and be very helpful.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Lobb, and then I will go to Monsieur Savard Tremblay. Mr. Lobb.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And just what I would like to say is, in my riding, we likely have over 600 supply managed farms. It's likely more than that. And you think of the employment that spins off on that. So I hear what Mr. Savard is saying, but at the same time, could you imagine not dealing with this issue on the trade committee and giving it to somebody else or turning it down. I mean, there are people, whether you're a builder or you're a woodlot owner, you know, of a corporate sense or a sawmill, you're counting on this, and it's a huge part of some rural economies for sure. So I think we can do both and make sure that we meet the mandate. But I do think that there are a lot of Canadians that would be counting on us to get more answers on these tariffs.
Okay, Mr. Savard Tremblay and then Mr. Sarai.
Well, listen, I have a proposed amendment. As Ms. Ben-Diane mentioned, I'm closely attached to the supply management study, and I would like us to make sure that we do not prolong it. So I'd like to propose that we add something. It's a clarification. It will not alter the rest of the substance of the motion, but I'd like to add at the end of the motion from Ms. Gray that we add understanding that this June 7th meeting will be devoted to Bill C-216. I would like to make sure that we enter that in black and white. So I would propose that we add that amendment to the motion from the Conservatives.
Okay, Mr. Sarai.
Madam Chair, I just wanted to state that softwood lumber is an important issue for even and myself and Mr. Dollywall and others from British Columbia. It's a paramount issue. However, I think the CAM committee is already looking at a lot of these protectionist measures and has looked at this and should probably be the appropriate place for this study at this time. And I'm a member of that as well, as with my colleague from the other side here. But I think that might be the appropriate measure, as the timelines for doing such in this committee might be very tight. Thank you.
Ms. Ben-Diane.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'm glad we were able to hear from Mr. Sarai. I know that this issue is important right across the country, but particularly so in British Columbia, and we have many members of our caucus from British Columbia, including on this very committee. So I think what you have before you, Madam Chair, if I can summarize, is what it sounds like a general agreement that the softwood lumber issue should be studied. I understand what our colleague, Monsieur Savard Tremblay, is proposing, but wonder if I might just propose to him and to all colleagues that rather than engaging in what might be truncated studies, that we first address the private members bill 216. That we do so. I believe the discussion around the table was revolving around either 2 meetings or possibly 3 meetings. I'm happy to have that discussion again to see where members stand on this, but that we complete the review of 216 and then go to softwood lumber thereafter. That would be my suggestion, and I would be happy to move a formal amendment, but if you would like to hear from others first, I'm fine with that as well, Madam Chair.
Okay, Ms. Gray.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I think for the amendment that Mr. Savard Tremblay has, that I would be fine with that, absolutely. And so that it still, as I said earlier, stays within our original timelines. It addresses this very pressing and urgent issue that is important to Canadians, and then it still stays within our timelines that we've already all agreed to. So I would be fine with Mr. Savard Tremblay's amendment.
All right, can I then, Madam Clerk, I may need your assistance here. So in advance of knowing there was a lot of interest from all committee members on the softwood lumber, the clerk did reach out to the minister as to her availability. And she has confirmed that she would be available on June the 4th. So I'm going to ask the clerk to kind of make sure that I'm following things. If I understood between Mr. Savard Tremblay and everyone else, if we were to adopt the motion as is, Ms. Gray put forward, with the understanding that the minister would appear on June the 4th, that satisfies the requirements from there, and that, and I had already put together a schedule based on the responses to the email that went out that suggests that June 7th, we would deal with Bill C-216. June 11th, C216 with officials, and June 14th, clause by clause consideration of Bill C216. So if I put that out there, if everybody is in agreement
Madam-
with this,
Madam
yes,
Chair,
Ms. Bendayan? Yes.
Yes, I'm sorry, I'm terribly confused as to actually what is on the table at the moment. Monsieur Savard-Tremblay avait proposé.
Mr. Savard-Tremblay had proposed something, and then I proposed something, and now we're having a discussion. So I don't think that you have a very clear amendment in front of you, Madam Chair. With all due respect, I think that we should agree on a way to proceed. If not, I can propose an amendment and distribute it. But personally, what I propose is that we examine 216 first, and then examine the softwood lumber issue afterwards. And I believe that this would require an amendment to the motion from Ms. Gray and the Conservatives regarding just the date of June 4th in order to move it to after our study of Bill 216. Mr. Savard-Tremblay, up to you if you wish to move that amendment or if you would like it to come from me. But I think that we have reached a stage where we need to clarify things and have a clear idea what we're doing.
Well, I was trying to clarify that Mr. Savard-Tremblay had wanted to move an amendment to Ms. Gray's motion, adding that June the 7th would be for sure we would start with 216. So what I reiterated out was exactly how that might work. And I'm very conscious of time as well. So if we can come to an agreement on how we want to do this, I have Ms. Gray's hand and then Mr. Abutai. So Ms. Gray?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was just going to say, from the procedural standpoint that, that we have a motion, we have an amendment that we haven't, that I've accepted to the motion that we haven't considered before other, something else is brought forth. So we haven't. That's what we're addressing here first.
Yeah. The motion as amended would have to go first, is my understanding. Mr. Abutai.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I thought the amendment came from the Bloc Québécois. I'm surprised why Ms. Bendayan is jumping just to sort of either propose it, and I think by procedural facts that I know that already Ms. Gray spoke about that, and I hope that since the minister is available on the 4th, I think that will be inevitable. It will be easy, will be important to get the lumber issue dealt with, and I think it's quite critical. And in this way, we can hit, two birds with one stone. So I thought to clarify that for once.
Thank you very much. Okay, Mr. Raya.
Chair, if my understanding of the amendment is correct, Mr. Savard-Tremblay is proposing that his bill be discussed on 7th. It appears that it will get limited to only 7th, if my understanding of this amendment is correct. While when I listen to you, it appears that we are agreeing on 3 days of sitting for his private member's bill. So I don't know. Can somebody clarify on that, please?
Okay. All right. Now I have, hold on, Mr. Savard-Tremblay. Your amendment.
Yeah. Well, I could add the clarification right away before I talk about the 7th. I would indicate the 3 dates planned. That's a good point that was raised by my colleague just now.
And just to clarify your motion, Mr. Savard-Tremblay, your amendment to Ms. Gray's motion is to add June 7th, we would start the 216, correct?
Well, actually, I can read it out to you in French. We would add at the end of the motion. This would not prevent, and in fact, I'm quite prepared to. I just want to add the meaning of my amendment is to secure C16 for the dates to be fixed, but that doesn't prevent us. And I could hear Ms. Bendayan for another amendment on June 4th, but I would like to add my part on this, and then we can discuss another amendment. But I would like us to secure those 3 dates. So I would add it being understood that the meeting on June 7th, as well as the 11th and 14th of June, will be devoted to the study of Bill C-216.
Yes, that is, I believe, where we're heading. Madam Clerk, at this, okay, now I have Mr. Dollywell. I need to
Actually,
move on
point of order.
and I had Mr. Holback's hand somewhere. Lost
Point
it.
of order.
Okay, who's getting my attention? Sorry.
It's Matthew Green. Point of order.
Sorry, Matthew, you just popped up now. Yes, go ahead.
I do believe that you overlooked me in the last one, and I was willing to wait.
You weren't
but
on the screen.
Well, my hand is up.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I
so
know,
you
but
may
I
want to
didn't even
change the
see you.
settings onto a grid view so you can see us all. But if I could just get the whole motion read, because it feels like there's a lot on the table right now, and I just want to state that from our perspective, we were looking at the Wednesday or Thursday for softwood, but now I'm hearing a bunch of different things in here. So I just want to make sure I know what's being voted on. So if we can get the motion as proposed with the amendment, then that would give me a clearer picture.
Okay, so when we finish having this, okay, Mr. Holback's hand is down now. So, all right. So, Madam Clerk, I will read out the motion Ms. Gray moved, but we will be voting on Monsieur Savard Tremblay's amendment to start C-216 on June 7th. Correct?
Well, Mr. Savard-Tremblay just added that that June 7th, 11th, and 14th be devoted to Bill C-216.
216, right? So, not seeing any further discussion. All those in favor of the amendment to the main motion? Can I see some hands? Madam Clerk, can you record this, please?
This is very difficult. Can we do a recorded vote? It's rare that the clerk would ask that, but I think at this point it's difficult.
Yes, you need a recorded vote.
Yeah, just for clarity. So on Mr. Savard-Tremblay's motion to devote June 7th, 11th, and 14th to Bill C-216. Mr. Aria. I don't hear you, sir.
You're on mute.
Abstain.
Ms. Bendayan.
En faveur.
Monsieur Daliwal.
Favor?
Sorry?
I support.
Thank you. Mr. Sarai.
Yes, in favor.
Mr. Sheehan. Mr. Sheehan.
For.
Mr. Abultaif.
Yes.
Ms. Gray.
In favor.
Mr. Holback.
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Lobb.
Yes.
Mr. Savard-Tremblay.
Bien entendu.
Mr. Green.
Sure.
10 yeas.
Okay, the amendment of Mr. Savard-Tremblay carries. All right, so now we need a vote on the main motion moved by Ms. Gray.
As amended.
As amended.
Thank you. So show of hands or?
Can we get a show of hands?
Point of order. Point of order.
Okay, the point of order, that's Mr. Savard-Tremblay.
I just understood that Ms. Bendayan wanted to move another amendment. If I am not mistaken, perhaps I misunderstood.
Madame la Présidente.
Yes.
Madam Chair?
Diane.
Yes, well, what I proposed earlier, I think it's still relevant, even though we changed things a little with the amendment that was just passed. But I had suggested that we consider 216 before we proceed with the meeting on softwood lumber. And I'm not sure, seeing as you've already selected certain dates for the study for consideration of Bill C-216. That can still work, but Madam Chair, could you please remind us as members what is the schedule that you were prepared to study next week? That way we'll have an idea of what we're dealing with in the coming days.
At the moment, based on the direction that we are going in, that I see us going in, May 31st, we have the draft reports on WTO and ISDS. June 4th, to meet the motion that we're still before we've adopted. On June 4th, we ministered Ing and her officials on softwood trade. Then we would start Bill C-216 on June 7th, June 11th, and June 14th. That's what the committee has adopted so far. So that's where we are right now.
Madam Chair, I don't think the committee voted on the motion of Ms.
No,
Gray.
we haven't. We still have to vote on that motion, which is what we were about to do.
Right. So my question was with respect to the schedule of this committee for the 4th at the moment, which would not necessarily be softwood lumber until we
No, it could be open to whatever the committee wants it to be if the committee votes down the main motion. So I'd like us to vote on this motion by Ms. Gray. If it carries, then June 4th is the last date, the availability that's on the schedule, and that the minister could attend.
I understand. Perhaps let me phrase it this way. Were we to continue our study for Mr. Sheehan on the environment and its impact on trade, was that the original schedule for the 4th?
Yes, we could do that. Yes, that was the plan.
Thank you.
Prior to the Ms. Gray's motion. All right, so I don't even know where to start. Mr. Green, you don't have your hand up, but I see you on the top of the screen.
Oh, I do. It is up, and I do appreciate being recognized.
There it is on the very side corner there, but it's a different color than all the others. So
well, as am I. So this is the beautiful thing about Zoom. I appreciate the equity, diversity, and inclusion of the technology.
Listen, let's just move on here. So
I just, I want to state I appreciate that I share in a nonpartisan way the confusion of many of the people in this committee. But I did request, if you recall, a full reading of the motion that is before us.
Yes.
So that we know exactly what it is we're voting on.
And we will have that exactly when we're ready to vote. I have to deal with
the challenge with that, Madam Chair, if I may, is that in order for me to decide whether I want to have an intervention based on the vote, I need to know what we're voting on. Because if you're only going to read it out at the time of the vote, it's too late. And I just would have asked, for the purpose of this scheduling, I'm here on behalf of somebody else, that you not rush through this meeting in this way and that you slow down a little bit and just provide us a chance to make sure that we're adequately representing the interest of the positions that we want to take as MPs here.
So, Mr. Green, I am going to read out the motion that Ms. Gray moved earlier, just to make sure that everybody's very clear. And Ms. Gray moved that the committee hold a meeting to invite the Minister of Small Business, Export Promotion and International Trade, and relevant government officials to discuss the United States Department of Commerce preliminary determinations increasing duties on Canadian softwood lumber exports from 8.99% to 18.32%, that the meeting be at least 2 hours in length, that the minister appear for no fewer than 1 hour, and that appropriate government officials appear for no fewer than 2 hours, and that this meeting occur no later than June 4th, 2021. We will vote on that shortly, but I have Mr. Dhaliwal and Mr. Hoback. Okay, Mr. Dhaliwal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I've been through these committee meetings, for many years, but not as many as you did. But when we have draft report going on WTO, then we have Bill that 216. We are saying that we will be able to go through on 7th, 11th, 14th class by clause. I have always seen that there is some reason that it will take more than one meeting or something. So if we do that, I think we are jeopardizing everything. We might be jeopardizing the draft report on WTO. We might be jeopardizing the Bill 216. If the intention is to make sure that we finish the Bill 216, then I would agree with the Parliamentary Secretary Bentan that we should have 216 scheduled right after May 31st after the draft WTO report. Even though I'm from British Columbia, softwood lumber is always been near and dear to us here, as my colleague and my dear friend and brother Randeep said earlier. And we have studied this in previous years too, and I have raised this time and time again. So I just want to make sure that we don't jeopardize these two studies that we can do, 216 and draft on WTO. So that's why I was thinking, why don't we just finish off draft report on WTO? When it's done, then we start with 216. 216 is done, then we go to Madam Gray's motion on softwood lumber. And we jeopardize, of course, my Terry Shaheen. We just throw his thing out on environment.
All right. I'm on to Mr. Hoback next.
Thank you, Chair.
Then Ms. Gray, and then Ms. Sheehan.
Thank you, Chair. Madam Chair, it's Mr. Hoback here.
Yes.
First of all, now that we've done the amendment, we've actually fixed in the dates for the 216. Now, if we don't pass the main motion, the amendment doesn't pass either. So then the dates are not fixed in for 216. So that leaves it up in the air. In regards to the minister's availability, you've made it very clear the clerk has talked to the minister, and she's made it very clear the only days that she can be there. So it kind of does dictate the schedule in regards to...
Madame la Présidente.
Point of order, Madam Chair. It seems to me that we had agreed that those who were to speak had to turn on their camera.
I'm in an area I'm doing my best I can.
Mr. Hoback is having technical problems. We clearly hear his voice, and we all recognize it. So
mes excuses et
my apologies, and good luck to Mr. Hoback to solve those problems.
Okay, Mr. Hoback, are you?
Yes, I'm still there. So if I can finish my point, the schedule is kind of unraveling the way it has to unravel, and there's not a lot of choices in it in regards to completing it. What's surprising me here is the Liberals don't think this is a crisis. This is a crisis. This is a huge crisis. And I think the Bloc member would agree with me if he went back to his forestry workers and listened to them. They'd say it's a crisis from the big time, just like the dairy farmers would think they're facing a crisis. Plus, with tariff rate quotas nipping at their heels in the U.S., that's also a crisis. So, when I look at the studies, yes, they are important, but this time is of an essence, and to have the committee look at this quickly and have the minister's response and strategy around that would be very helpful for people in these industries to understand just exactly what's going on and how they're going to deal with it.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hoback. Mr. Sheehan?
Well, thank you very much. And all these issues that we're discussing today are extremely important. And, it's been raised about the Green Clean Tech study that we were going to get the recommendations done expeditiously. And I've spoken before. And first of all, people said it's mine, motion, but really it's the committee's motion, because we certainly did, Mr. Lobb's nuclear part and a whole bunch of things. And we heard a whole bunch from our testimony that action needs to be happening now. So I think that, there's a lot of really, really important things happening. We heard about the solar industry in Canada with an 18% tariff. The minister has raised it with officials. So all of this, tariffs and different issues that are facing, trade, and managed trade, if you want to call it, in sort of a basket, are important to address. But I'm for the 3 days identified for the particular dairy study that is undertaken, and as well. And I am in favor of studying the forest industry as well. But I think the real hinges here, and I think what the desire of the committee is to have the minister here on that particular date. So, I just wanted to make that abundantly clear that, if the minister, if that's not the best date and there is another date sometime in the very near future, I think, behooves us to take a look at that, and for us not to lose sight of that really important clean tech, green tech study that we're undertaking, and noting that we are running a little bit out of runway as the session is coming to an end. So I just wanted to make sure that I put that out there for consideration of the committee as well.
Thank you, Mr. Sheehan. Ms. Gray, and then Ms. Bendayan.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the conversation. I think that you've laid it out really clearly how the schedule will work, and it really stays very similar to what you originally had had previous, especially with the private members bill. So it's I think it's pretty simple, and you've determined when the minister is able to attend, and it meets within the motion. So I think overall it's pretty simple what we're dealing with here. And if the committee wants to continue on with other studies, and I mean, we still have the COVID-19, trade study open, we can sit during the summer, and that's a conversation that we can have, is looking at the work schedule. There are, that's something that we could certainly look at, and having meetings during the summer to continue on with these studies. So, but that's a separate conversation that we could all have if we choose to. But in the meantime, I'd like to call for a vote, because I think we've deliberated on this a lot, and then we can continue on with the other work we have to do today.
Okay, I only have one speaker left on the floor, and if it's okay with the committee, I think it's Ms. Bendayan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to respond firstly to a comment made earlier by Mr. Hoback. I do find it interesting that in the same breath he mentions the urgency of both the softwood lumber issue and the importance of looking at matters that pertain to our dairy farmers. We agree on both of those fronts, and that is exactly what this committee is discussing. I hope that my colleague wasn't indicating that the supply management private members bill 216 is not critical for our dairy farmers, because it is. So
that's not what I said, and that's not what I said. I said these are both very important. Okay. So for you to assume something different, that is actually putting words in my mouth.
Ms. Bendayan has the floor, Mr. Hoback. Please, Ms. Bendayan.
And my suggestion was that we study supply management first and then go straight to softwood lumber. And you implied that softwood lumber was not a priority for the Liberal Party of Canada, which is completely and utterly false. Okay. And so I wanted to correct the record there and propose that perhaps the easiest way to move forward is to vote on Ms. Gray's motion, but to allow some flexibility in the dates, because I personally am very confused as to where the schedule lies at the moment. Perhaps the chair can circulate an agenda where she proposes certain dates for everything, bearing in mind the urgency of the situation. But at this moment in time, I don't have a clear understanding of the next few meetings, and I believe that others would agree with me on that. And I am happy to support this motion to ensure that we do have one meeting as Ms. Gray proposes. All of the rest of the motion is certainly quite clear, but on the date, I'm having trouble understanding where we go from here, and whether or not we are doing 216 before the softwood lumber or not. So perhaps, Madam Chair, you can take that back once we vote on the motion without the date, and then circulate a schedule or a timeline between now and the end of the session, so that everybody has a clear picture of where this committee is going.
I'm happy to do this, and I think we need to vote on the motion that moved by Ms. Gray. I noticed, Mr. Savard-Tremblay, you have your hand raised, but I need to call a vote on this. I'll give you the floor is yours for. Go ahead.
Well, actually, I just wanted to have a clarification. Now we're voting on the motion as amended, but if there's another date that's being proposed, why not discuss that?
No other motions on the floor. We have adopted the amendment. I am now going to read out again the motion moved by Ms. Gray that we will vote on. And that says that the committee hold a meeting to invite the Minister of Small Business, Export Promotion, International Trade, relevant government officials to discuss the United States Department of Commerce preliminary determinations increasing duties on Canadian softwood lumber exports from 8.99 to 18.32. That the meeting be at least 2 hours in length, that the minister appear no fewer than 1 hour.
Point of order, Madam Chair, I have my hand up too.
There are members that still want to speak to this.
Okay, I'm sorry, but I'm trying, we have a full agenda for the rest of today's meeting.
I know, Madam Chair, you're one of the best chairs, but I had my hand up and
okay.
Sorry.
Yes, okay, go ahead, Mr. Dhaliwal. Mr. Dhaliwal.
Madam Chair, two things. Number one, I would like to ask, I will through you to Madam Bendayan, if she have the amendment to study 216 before the softwood lumber. Otherwise, I'm going to bring in an amendment that instead of 4th, let me say the minister come on 14th on softwood wood lumber. Instead, change the date from 4th to 14th and change the other dates earlier for the 216.
We have already adopted
But
June
we can,
7th,
but we can,
11th, and 14th for 216.
I still can bring an amendment.
Okay, so
Right.
you're
Point of order, Chair.
yes,
This is totally unorganized because you've already
Yeah.
fixed in the amendment of the
Yes.
dates. So to move another amendment, the only way that could have happened is if you would have did a sub amendment to the original amendment beforehand.
Exactly,
So
and
it's
that
too late.
wasn't done. We've already adopted that one. So we are I'm going to call for a vote on the main motion that I had read out halfway. I will complete reading out this motion from 8.99% to 18.32%, and that the meeting be at least 2 hours in length, that the minister appear for no fewer than 1 hour, and that appropriate government officials appear for no fewer than 2 hours, and that this meeting occur no later than June 4th, 2021. At this point, I'm going to call for a vote. Madam Clerk, would you do a recorded vote? Now, before I do that, I've got 2 hands up here. I've got Randy Hobax. Okay, he's gone wherever you disappeared to. Okay, so there's no hands up, okay? So Madam Clerk, can we please have a recorded vote on Ms. Gray's motion? And that would be as amended.
Yes, it would be Ms. Gray's motion as amended by Mr. Savard
By
Tremblay.
Mr.
with the
Savard
3 dates.
Tremblay.
Okay.
Everybody clear here? All right. There's no other motions or amendments or anything else. This is what we're voting on. Okay, Madam Clerk.
Mr. Aria,
Yeah.
did I hear yes?
Mr. Raya, where are you? Is that a yes?
Yes?
Yes.
Okay. Ms. Bendayan, Madame Bendayan.
Oui, en faveur.
Mr. Dhaliwal,
Vote.
I'm not sure I heard.
In favor.
Thank you. Mr. Sarai,
Yes, in favor.
Mr. Sheehan,
Yes,
Mr. Abul Taif,
en favor.
Ms. Gray,
In favor.
Mr. Hoback,
Yes.
Mr. Lobb,
Yes. Yes.
Mr. Savard Tremblay,
En faveur.
Mr. Green,
In favor.
11 yeas.
That's wonderful. All right, at this point, I would have to suspend the meeting so we can get our witnesses all online here. And I will have the clerk immediately following the meeting send out a clear schedule of the meeting based on today. Okay, so I move suspension for 5 minutes. We have, as an individual, Alexander Douglas, Research Group Leader, Oxford University. From the Amnesty International Canada Francophonie, we have France Isabelle Langlois, Executive Director, and Colette Levere, responsible for campaigns. From Doctors Without Borders, we have Jason Nickerson, Humanitarian Representative to Canada, and Adam Houston, Medical Policy and Advocacy Officer, and Réseau Québécois sur Intégration Continentale, Claude Valencourt, member, and the network coordinator, Mr. Bennen. I'll turn it over to Mr. Douglas, please, for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much for the invitation to appear today, and I hope I can be of some help to the committee's study on this very important topic. Some background first. I'm a university employee and researcher, but I'm speaking in a personal capacity today. I do have a conflict of interest to declare, in that I may receive income as an inventor on a patent application relating to manufacturing of the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine. My role in the Oxford COVID vaccine program has primarily been to develop the manufacturing process and lead the initial technology transfer, both to sites within the UK and to overseas sites, including the Serum Institute of India. I've subsequently worked closely with AZ, but I can't speak for them at all. I understand that your remit includes Canada's domestic vaccine supply, but I've had no involvement with AZ's arrangements for supply to Canada. Equity of access to our vaccine has been a really key driver for me and our team from the beginning. We transferred manufacturing to low-income countries at the same time as setting it up in the UK. We prioritized willingness to pursue equitable access in our choice of pharma partners, and we pushed very hard for terms to promote equitable access when we did enter the partnership with AZ. And I think the outcome really has been quite radical on that, both in terms of pricing and distribution. Clearly, though, the world is now in exactly the situation we were worried about when we were taking those decisions. Personally, I think it's important to be clear. It's outrageous that some countries are vaccinating 18-year-olds, while the global rate of COVID-19 deaths is pretty much as high as it ever has been, and health workers and 70-year-olds are unprotected and are dying in many parts of the world. And this is damaging for all of us, not least because of the ongoing economic disruption. The IMF's published an excellent study showing massive economic benefits for high-income countries of fast and equitable global vaccination. So what can be done now? And in particular, is a TRIPS waiver the right thing to focus on? So on this, I think it's critical to understand how different the situation is now from the problem of HIV drug access 20 years ago in low-income countries, for which patent waivers were very effective. That was a problem of price. There was potential manufacturing capacity sitting idle, and the patent was the main block. Now we're in a much more complicated situation. The manufacturing capacity itself needs to be expanded as quickly as possible, and that requires removal of multiple non-patent constraints, raw material supply, skills, non-patent know-how. And removing patents implies new entrants with less experience competing with the innovator companies for those resources and duplicating efforts on developing know-how. And personally, I think that would be really quite inefficient. I think that governments working in a critical but constructive partnership with the innovators to expand output and improve equity of supply is likely to be a much better solution. But it's clear that the status quo isn't working. Some of those innovator companies are not currently feeling that it's in their interest to prioritize low-income country supply. I think we need to examine and address the reasons for that. And I think countries like Canada can play a really positive role in that. So first, we need to be clear that the current situation on distribution of the vaccines that do exist isn't tolerable. We need moral pressure on Pfizer, Moderna, the governments which are vaccinating young adults to donate a proportion of their supply immediately. Secondly, we need to see whether we can make the supply we have cover more people. It may well be that half doses of the existing vaccines are adequate, which would double supply at a stroke. That could be established very rapidly if clinical trials of low doses were set up urgently, but I don't see the companies rushing to do that without governmental intervention. Thirdly, of course, we need to expand the supply. And with a G7 meeting coming up, I think we need an international G7-led version of the Operation Warp Speed effort. But rather than focusing on initial vaccine development for one country, this time focused on manufacturing capacity expansion for the world. And I think that needs governments to be really constructively engaged, not just donating money. I think that effort can and it should echo the features which made Warp Speed and the UK Vaccines Task Force effective. And that means bringing together technical expertise, getting into the detail, understanding the different bottlenecks facing each manufacturer, creating solutions. It needs to use the clout of government to compel, but deploy it smartly. And it needs to act not just as a passive or even a pushy customer, but like a venture capital investor, as a partner and enabler for industry. We're dealing here with transnational supply chains. So this has to be an international solution. It's an international problem. But increasing output should help everyone too. It's a huge win-win. And I hope that you and Canada may consider picking up on the positive motivation behind the patent waiver idea and driving things forward in a really effective, equitable direction. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Douglas. On to Amnesty International, Francine's Lang-Law. Ms. Langley, whoever wants to go forward for Amnesty International.
Yes, thank you. Mesdames et messieurs, membres du Parlement.
Ladies and gentlemen, members of the Standing Committee on International Trade of the Canadian Parliament, thank you for this invitation to Canada's French language Amnesty International concerning the proposal for a temporary waiver of intellectual property affecting trade as presented by TRIPS and WTO. Our organization intervened when the pandemic broke out to demand international solidarity on behalf of all states, including the richest, and in particular Canada, concerning the Canada Francophone section of Amnesty International. We want Canada to firmly support the waiver in its revived version of May 21, presented to WTO. Without further ado, in October 2020, already 7 months ago, India and South Africa demanded a temporary waiver of the TRIPS agreement at WTO, enabling countries to proceed this way, so that more than 100 countries out of 164 WTO members are in favor of that, and a certain number of prosperous governments are opposed to it, including Canada. Some remain neutral. Canada claims that it's not blocking this initiative, but only asking questions. But actually, it's urgent, and Canada's position has the result of blocking the adoption of the waiver. However, this waiver, by allowing the temporary suspension of application and execution of certain intellectual property rights on pharmaceutical patents, would contribute to guaranteeing that medical products connected to the pandemic, including safe, effective vaccines, can be manufactured by a larger number of producers quickly and be available to everyone at an affordable price. By supporting the waiver of intellectual property for vaccines, Canada would place the lives of people around the world ahead of the profits of pharmaceutical giants and their shareholders. The only way to end the pandemic is to do it worldwide, and the only way to achieve that is to place people ahead of profits. This can only be done by mutualizing the knowledge and technologies. International standards on human rights that Canada adheres to and international rules of trade clearly state that protection of intellectual property must never be done at the cost of public health. COVID-19 is not only a health and economic crisis, it's a human rights crisis. It can only be overcome if we respect the objectives of sustainable development and not leave people out. Starting from the principle that nobody will be safe until everyone is safe, Canada today has an opportunity to make a decision that can help us achieve that goal. Since the beginning of the pandemic, there has been a broad-based worldwide consensus on the urgent need for all countries to collaborate in order to ensure that everyone, everywhere, is protected. The UN General Assembly several times reiterated the need to reinforce international cooperation and multilateral efforts to halt and vanquish the pandemic. And there's the role of worldwide immunization against COVID-19 and in order to halt and eliminate the transmission, in order to end the pandemic. Under international law on human rights, states also have an obligation to provide financial and technical support necessary to deal with health, including dealing with international propagation of a disease. However, pharmaceutical companies around the world are continuing their activities as though things were normal, thereby limiting the capacity of production and supply. Canada suggests that intellectual property was not an obstacle as regards pharmaceutical products and technologies connected with COVID-19. This is ignoring the clear evidence that there have been shortages caused by restrictive terms of licenses in a number of countries. The U.S. since May 5th has been upholding this waiver, at least as regards vaccines, and the European Parliament has declared it's open to the initiative as of last May 20th. Amnesty reiterates its demand.
Mr. Nickerson for 5 minutes, please.
Great. Hello, thank you for having us. We're going to speak about two issues that are part of the committee's study from the perspective of our organization, which provides medical assistance to people affected by crises in more than 70 countries around the world. First, Canada should support the TRIPS waiver. The waiver is not a complete solution to scaling up and diversifying COVID-19 vaccine manufacturing to address the supply shortages, but supporting the waiver and quickly clears space and removes legal barriers to then focus on the many other barriers. We emphasize that any waiver must encompass not only vaccines, but other tools like therapeutic drugs, diagnostics, and medical devices like ventilators, as well as components and equipment needed to make vaccines. Canada's position during the discussions around the TRIPS waiver has been one of indecision, never formally rejecting it, while repeatedly raising alternatives that have failed in the past. One such alternative raised is the TRIPS Article 31 bis mechanism, which is operationalized by Canada's Access to Medicines regime, or CAMR. It is our position that Canada should follow through on its own claims of CAMR's effectiveness by taking the necessary first step of adding COVID-19 vaccines and drugs to Schedule 1 of the Patent Act. While MSF does not believe that TRIPS Article 31 bis or CAMR are effective tools at the best of times, let alone sufficient in this pandemic, Canada's failure to even list these items in Schedule 1 means Canada is the single greatest roadblock to utilizing the very tools it has promoted at the WTO. The second issue we would like to discuss is domestic production. MSF supports increased domestic production, but it must be done correctly. If Canada's approach to scaling up biomanufacturing in this country is to provide financial support to pharmaceutical companies to build factories here, this funding must come with guarantees of affordable access to the final products, both for Canada and the rest of the world. This is just common sense. If the public is paying to develop and manufacture medicines, we should all be able to access them at fair prices. To this end, Canada must also be transparent about the terms of all such deals. Another key question is what to do between pandemics with the public manufacturing capacity Canada is building. New quality assured manufacturing capacity that's been initiated for the purposes of producing COVID-19 vaccines should not be shut down or sold off to private interests after the pandemic fades. Rather, Canada should use this capacity to address other important global health issues. Producing a range of products keeps facilities operating and Canada's skills sharp. After all, it's not clear what the next pandemic will be, and the world needs a diversity of manufacturing capacities. Canada has world-class researchers. Where it falls short is end-to-end development to get innovations out of labs and to patients. Products that are vital for global health but have limited commercial appeal have no real pathway to approval. Take the Canadian-invented Ebola vaccine, discovered by scientists at the National Microbiology Laboratory in Winnipeg. After discovering it, Canada signed a deal to license it to an American company. This ultimately led to the vaccine languishing on a shelf for years. This meant this effective vaccine was not ready in time for the 2014 West African Ebola outbreak. To be blunt, this cost lives. Canada has other promising experimental vaccines, like for Lassa fever and Marburg virus, that have faced similar challenges. End-to-end production, from lab bench to patient bedside, ought to be part of our biomanufacturing strategy. Our overarching message here is that there are many important diseases that are essentially market failures. They are not profitable enough to attract investment from private pharmaceutical companies, yet represent significant public health threats. Ebola, Lassa fever, Marburg, and prior to this pandemic, coronaviruses are all examples. There are also many important drugs and vaccines that already exist that are regularly in shortage or hard to obtain. Diphtheria antitoxin, the product Connaught Labs was founded to produce, is now almost impossible to procure worldwide. We know this firsthand, as when we were responding to simultaneous diphtheria outbreaks in Yemen, Bangladesh, and Venezuela in 2017, we quickly realized how few options existed. The same is true for many antibiotics and other low-profit medicines. A robust biomanufacturing strategy that is guided by public health needs and not the pursuit of profits is what needs to guide Canada's biomanufacturing strategy, which ought to be linked to an R&D strategy.
Thank you very much. Sorry to interrupt, Mr. Nickerson. I'm trying to get everybody's points across here this afternoon and allow the members to have some questions. On to Mr. Vaillancourt, please, for 5 minutes.
It's Mr. Ben Hamid, who is going to speak. Thank you. First of all, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of members of our organization, the Quebec Intercontinental Group, Mr. Vaillancourt and myself, thank you for this invitation. Currently, as you know, the debate on the waiver on intellectual property for coronavirus vaccines, there seems to be a breach between different zones. As my colleague said earlier, it's officially supported by 58 governments and 100 countries. It's about a small, powerful group opposes it, including Brazil, Canada, Japan, the UK, and the EU. Ladies and gentlemen, whether we are for or against the waiver, one thing is for sure. No one can deny that vaccine nationalization can harm all the investments that were made to halt the pandemic from the start. The production of a number of coronavirus vaccines within a year is an unprecedented scientific achievement. However, such a success can be undermined by a worrisome situation. And it's for this reason that the organization suggests that you suspend the approach for 2 essential reasons. On the one hand, for non-economic reasons, and for human reasons, and for purely economic reasons. First of all, it's time to put human issues ahead of other considerations, because it's unfair for the poorest in developing countries be at the mercy of pharmaceutical giants. And most of the subsidies on research for coronavirus come from public funds. To capitalize profits and socialize expenses, here we are again. Citizens pay for the same vaccine twice, first to finance research and development, and then downstream to acquire the necessary doses. If developed countries received more than half the contracts for vaccines, developing countries will not be able to have broad vaccination before 2025, which could allow dangerous mutations to occur and cost many lives. On the economic level, the fight against the most expensive vaccines, and it's a problem over the pandemic. It was announced in research published by an organization in the U.S. Why? Quite simply because if northern countries remain vaccinated and those in the south are broadly excluded from vaccination, the world economy will have $9.2 trillion of losses, and nearly half of it will be absorbed by advanced countries such as Canada. Because of the recession caused by the pandemic in non-advanced countries, exporters and importers in advanced economies such as Canada will, on the one hand, face slowed markets and also value chains worldwide that will be disrupted. For this reason, today, if we provide free universal access to coronavirus vaccine, is not only altruistic and moral, but also an economic necessity. In light of these considerations, therefore, Canada is invited to take into account, and our network suggests that intellectual property be waived in the international discussions. In long term, the intellectual property for the vaccines has to be connected with knowledge transmission. Some countries in the south have shown a lot of capacity to provide medications, but if they extend the protection of brand medication, different free trade agreements will make it difficult to transmit important information for transmission of drugs and their accessibility. Ladies and gentlemen, whether you're in favor of the economy or other factors, opening up vaccines is the only way to achieve this. Extraordinary circumstances in this pandemic demand extraordinary measures. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, sir. Appreciate your sensitivity to the time as well. On to Ms. Gray. There's only time for 3 minutes each, one question, each one of our members, in order to try to get everybody a question in here. So it'll be 3 minutes. Please, Ms. Gray.
Great, thank you, Madam Chair, and I want to thank all of the witnesses for being here today and for all of their information. First up, my first question is for Doctors Without Borders, and I appreciate, first of all, your comments on Canadian manufacturing, and this is one of our conservative 5 pillars to, as part of our recovery plan, is to secure our country and to make us more resilient and prepared. And I have a question for you. You know, we know that TRIPS waiver is no silver bullet, and we need a comprehensive approach to get vaccines to developing countries. So what role should Canada be playing right now in doing this outside of the TRIPS waiver negotiations? You mentioned a couple of ideas in your intervention, but they were like more longer term. So what do you think could be done right now while we're still in the middle of the pandemic?
Well, thanks for the question. The immediate answer to that is that we need countries who have secured doses of COVID vaccines to be committing to making donations of a certain percentage of the shipments that they will be receiving. You know, the world is, quite frankly, facing a massive inequity in access that's in motion today. And there is a global shortage of available supply. The COVAX facility, which is the primary mechanism for many countries to access COVID-19 vaccines, is short 150 million doses this month, and that will increase to 190 million doses next month. So really in the face of quite limited manufacturing capacity that has increased but hasn't significantly diversified, the sort of immediate solution that we need, and it's a stopgap measure, it's an emergency measure, is for countries to be donating doses to be reallocated to low-income countries.
Thank you so much. Our time is so limited here, so I want to squeeze in a couple more quickly if I could.
1 minute remaining.
Okay, you're aware of the COVAX program, and you know, while Canada is allowed to take vaccines through this program, do you think it's appropriate for us to be doing so? We're the only G7 country at this point.
Canada should not be taking doses from the COVAX facility as part of this round of dose distributions. It's appropriate for Canada to be a purchaser through the COVAX facility, but Canada also procured a large number of doses through bilateral agreements, and those have competed with COVAX's ability to secure doses. So my answer is no.
Thank you very much. Then on to Ms. Bendayan, please.
Oui, merci beaucoup, Madame.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And also, I would like to thank all the witnesses today. And my apologies for the limited time. Mr. Ben Mad, I would like to return to your comments to clarify that Canada does not reject and has never rejected the proposal for a waiver of intellectual property. As you are aware, the WTO operates as a consensus-based organization, so it requires a consensus at the table. And as you stated, about 100 countries are in favor. Nevertheless, everyone has to be on the same wavelength, and that's why we raise questions and push the parties to advance their thinking process. We received a text, I believe, on the May 21st or 25th, just a few days ago, in which Canada stated, we are going to work on the text together, which we will move forward together. But you also heard testimony from other witnesses here and other experts who said it's not just intellectual property that halts the moving forward on the vaccine. We have more than 100 ingredients in those vaccines, and we also have problems in the supply chain. What do you think about those other issues, and how can we solve them in order to move forward? Is that up to the WTO or somewhere else?
Amnesty International just to comment a little bit on what they are seeing on the ground, perhaps Doctors Without Borders as well. What else is missing other than the actual COVID-19 vaccines? Are we in need of needles or other materials in order to make sure that everybody around the world has access to a COVID-19 vaccine? Alors, Monsieur Benmade.
So, Mr. Mahdi, perhaps we could start with you. Thank you for your comment and questions. First of all, for sure, this negotiation process that you mentioned is a laborious, long process. It requires a consensus of 164 WTO organizations, which is no easy task. In this case, in order to get around that restriction, which will take time, because we expect that that consensus will be approved toward the end of the year. There are alternatives to be examined. So first of all, the countries with excess vaccine should share with those who don't have enough, and the members of WTO should break down non-tariff barriers concerning raw materials and intermediate materials needed for producing vaccines. That way we will have some solutions to avoid problems along the supply chain. Also, the OMS, the World Health Organization, WHO, should collaborate on vaccines for emergency authorizations to speed up vaccines locally. And finally, we can't wait until the waiver is concluded. Let's deal with identification of certain countries possibly able to produce the vaccine in the south, Bangladesh, Morocco, Pakistan, and Senegal, and other questions that you asked, whether these property rights are only on.
I have to move on to Monsieur Savard Tremblay for 3 minutes, please.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I found it interesting the way things had started for the Quebec Intercontinental Group. I want to give them time to finish their previous answer. And I'd like to add that we know that the Russians and the Chinese in their vaccines, they sell licenses. So it's similar to submitting patents. So how come that method of operation is not being applied equally to Western companies, so to speak? Over to you.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Savard Tremblay.
Thank you, Mr. Savard Tremblay. So to complete my answer, the revision submitted by South Africa and India a few days ago clarifies certain points on which the countries might have a greater opportunity to share a vision to move forward on the waiver or not. First of all, the revised text suggests suspending this on diagnostic devices, related equipments, vaccines, and methods and means of production for prevention, treatment, and halting COVID. That's the first point that was revised in the most recent text. The second point that was revised is that they clarified the duration for which this waiver is requested. In other words, it's asked for a minimum of 3 years starting from the decision. So the General Council would apply it and have a right to re-examine it under exceptional circumstances that justify possibly the waiver. The third point that was revised is that the General Council will have an opportunity to re-examine the waiver, and then each year, beyond 3 years, a maximum of 3 years. So the last point that was revised is that the members of the WTO will not contest any measure in those provisions for the waiver included in that decision. They will not challenge it. So this text clarifies certain points that were ambiguous in the first version, and that the partner countries will now have a more complete text to discuss as to whether they'll move forward or not with the waiver.
Merci.
Thank you. Well, I'll move on to the next part of my question. Why is it that this process of selling licenses is being used by companies in China and Russia for vaccines, but is not being applied by other companies that provide vaccines now in Western countries?
Monsieur Savard-Tremblay, est-ce que vous pouvez me préciser juste la question?
I'm sorry, could you just clarify that question? Do you have an idea of why that mechanism is being used more in those particular countries?
Non, présentement, je n'ai pas de...
No, I don't have any concrete data to be able to answer your question.
On to Mr. Green, please, for 3 minutes.
We've heard today in testimony, and we've heard repeatedly that Canada has so far maintained that it has not rejected the TRIPS proposal, and at the same time, it has not supported the text-based negotiations and has continually emphasized the need to hear about specific concrete IP challenges rather than the solutions. So through you to our friend from Doctors Without Borders, would you care to comment about the double standard that our Canadian government has to the TRIPS waiver internationally versus what we're doing here in Canada domestically?
Thank you for the question. I mean, I think that we would emphasize that Canada actually acted quite quickly in enacting domestic legislation that gave the Canadian government the ability to issue compulsory licenses. So this happened early on in the pandemic. So, you know, this was prior to there being any vaccines or therapeutics that were approved for use. Canada, you know, as I say, gave itself the ability to issue compulsory licenses to effectively waive intellectual property rights in the event that Canada needed to, you know, scale up the manufacturing of a COVID-19 tool. So, you know, this is effectively the speed and the precision that's needed to respond to a global pandemic today. We, of course, recognize that intellectual property rights and rules are not the only barrier, but I think that all of us would agree that they do represent part of the problem, and waiving these rules represents part of the solution in addition to the many other things that need to be put into place. So
there's a sorry to interrupt, there's a pretty important point that was raised in your submission, and I want you to talk about the moral imperative for a moment, that Canada does not have to apply for the TRIPS waiver domestically, but should not prevent other countries from doing so. Would you care to comment on that?
Well, I think it's exactly that. You know, Canada can simply support the passage of the waiver, so that countries that are facing potential legal barriers have that risk removed. Right. This is fundamentally what the TRIPS waiver is about: is removing the legal risk of a company or a country pursuing domestic manufacturing of COVID vaccines. There's other things that need to fall into place, but removing that risk is a significant step.
And if I could, in closing, while we have Mr.
Just very quick, Mr. Green.
No, I have 30 seconds. If we could, in closing, Mr. Douglas, Oxford started off with a promise that they would actually commit this for free in licensing. What changed?
Well, AstraZeneca are selling this not for profit. We have out-licensed, or AstraZeneca.
No, sorry, the university. The university, sir, promised to provide licensing for free and then license to AstraZeneca. What changed?
So I should be clear, I'm appearing in a personal capacity. We tried quite hard, some of us, to find a partner who were willing to take a non-exclusive license. And that we couldn't find such a partner.
Sorry, Mr. Douglas, but your time is up for this member, and I have to thank the witnesses. Apologies for the shortness of time, but we have another panel that has to come before the committee yet today. So thank you to the witnesses that are before us. I will suspend for a minute or two while our clerk connects the other panelists. Thank you again to the witnesses. My apologies for the limited amount of time. want to welcome back again Ambassador Stephen DeBoer and the officials from Global Affairs Canada and from Innovation, Science and Development Canada who have accepted our offer to come back for a second time following their appearance on April 30th before the committee in order to answer members' questions. I understand you do not have opening remarks, which we are very glad that you don't, and we can get right on to committee members, and so we will be very limited. We'll start with Ms. Gray for 5. We'll try and see if we can give everybody 5 minutes in the first round. So Ms. Gray for 5 minutes, please.
Great, thank you, Madam Chair, and I would like to thank all of the witnesses for coming back to this committee here today. I'd like to start my questioning to Ambassador DeBoer. And Ambassador, has Canada's position on the WTO TRIPS waiver changed since the last time you appeared before this committee back in April?
You're on mute, sir.
Sorry, I thought you controlled my my sound, not me. So thank you for the question. In fact, Canada has not overall changed its position. We have never been opposed to the waiver. What has perhaps changed somewhat is that we have been more clearly articulated that we're very much ready to engage with the proponents on the proposal, but we have never been opposed to the TRIPS waiver itself.
Thank you, and I hope, Madam Chair, that delay doesn't cut into my time there. Can you please table to the committee, Ambassador, any analysis you or your department may have prepared on the United States announcement from a few weeks ago supporting a COVID-19 TRIPS waiver?
There is no analysis of the U.S. proposal because the U.S. proposal is nothing more than what you have simply just stated, that they would support discussions of a waiver with respect to TRIPS.
Ambassador, with the TRIPS waiver proposal at the WTO, we know that the WTO often works on consensus. So do you foresee consensus being reached on this proposal in a timely manner?
Well, that's very difficult to say because it's difficult to know what consensus looks like when you actually haven't got text on the table. But I would imagine that if it meets the criteria for the membership, which is to ensure the timely delivery and of vaccines and the increased production of vaccines, I see no reason why the membership would block consensus. But that's something that will have to be visited when we actually see text on the table and it ensures and we can ensure that it meets those criteria.
Ambassador, so if consensus isn't reached, is there still a way to get the TRIPS waiver proposal enacted by the WTO? And how would that process work?
Well, the WTO operates by consensus, and so I think it would be difficult to imagine how that would be possible. But I would also say that for many members, including Canada, intellectual property issues around COVID-19 are only one aspect of the issue, and there are a range of other issues that can be discussed at the WTO, including trade facilitation, including the removal of export restrictions, things that would encourage the supply of vaccines and inputs to those vaccines. So there are a range of policy options and legal options that are available to the WTO, and consensus could be reached on other aspects. Canada is working hard, for example, in the Ottawa Group to come forward with proposals that would address some of these other issues.
So on that same note then, where do you see the biggest hurdles being right now at the WTO with the TRIPS waiver proposal? Like who are the large players who are not presently supportive of this waiver, and what is their reasoning for not supporting it to this point, even though, as you said, you haven't seen the text, but just in general with comments that you're aware of?
I think it's important to note that no member of the WTO has said that they are opposed to the waiver, at least the current proposal that's on the table. Every member is willing to engage. I think that the fundamental issue for many members, and I don't feel particularly comfortable speaking on their behalf, but I think the issue will be, will this actually increase vaccine production, and will it increase vaccine production and allow more people to get vaccinated? That will be the fundamental question. That is the rationale, the stated rationale for the waiver. So that is the test by which it needs to be measured, and that will be the test when it is being discussed.
Ambassador, the
Thank you
last
very
time that
much,
you were
Ms.
here,
Gray. You've got 20 seconds left, and it just won't work in a tight schedule we're in today. Mr. Raya, please, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ambassador Dubois, thank you for coming back, and thank you so much for you and your team's work on this file. I have heard that because of the engagement of countries like Canada, that the current proposal on the table is much better than the first version, and a lot of ambiguity has been removed. And I'm sure that still this proposal has to be refined further. About 20 years back in my career, I did make a study on technology transfer. The knowledge transfer, many people think that you just waive the restrictions and everything will flow automatically, but people don't know that the knowledge composes of the coded knowledge and the tacit knowledge. Any waiver can easily make the flow of coded knowledge available, but the tacit knowledge that is required to see the actual vaccine production go on, and along with all the other supply management issues, is not so simple. I would like to know that while we are in principle not opposed to this, obviously this pandemic is a very, very major threat to everybody in the world, and we need to do whatever that is required to see that this pandemic threat is eliminated. However, going forward, if this waiver is just implemented as is without looking at all the aspects, what are the unintended consequences you think may happen?
Well, we don't know, and it's one of the reasons why we're asking questions. And it's why, for example, Minister Ng in her statement said that she was committed to finding solutions that accelerate global vaccine protection that do not negatively impact public health. There are concerns, I should say, but this needs to be examined further. There are concerns that it may divert inputs into vaccine production. It may undermine existing relationships, which could also then subsequently undermine vaccine production. And so these are questions that need to be examined. I don't think it's safe to say that there are no downsides. We don't know that. And so this needs to be discussed further. It's one of the reasons why Canada has been asking questions and been engaging with the proponents since October. This needs to be examined more closely.
Thank you, Ambassador. This exactly is the right way to go. When the US came out with the press statement that they're supporting, everybody thought, oh my God, okay, here it is. It will happen tomorrow, without completely understanding what is happening. You did mention the other options that Canada is exploring. Can you quickly update if any of those options are taken, have gone further? Any chance of that getting implemented or considered for sure?
Yes, there are ongoing discussions. And I would say right now at the WTO, we are discussing the next ministerial conference, which will start at the end of November. We're in active discussions about what are the things that need to be done in the lead up to the ministerial conference, and what are the outputs from the ministerial conference. The DG and the General Council Chair have been very clear. It's impossible to imagine that we would go into a ministerial conference without doing something that would address the pandemic. And so, as I had mentioned earlier, the Ottawa group has proposals on trying to make sure that there's access to PPE, access to therapeutics, increasing vaccine production. and there is growing support for this proposal. You will have seen, or you will see very shortly, the EU is engaging in this discussion, both as an Ottawa Group member, but it also has some other ideas. The Director General herself is engaging in something called the Third Way, which is trying to marry manufacturing capacity, IP, and the industry together to increase vaccine production. And so there is a number of proposals that are out there with growing support. And so it's difficult to know exactly what form this will take by the time we get to MC12, but there is growing support and there is a recognition that something must be done at the WTO. What we're talking about now is what are those things that could be done.
Thank you very much. On to Mr. Savard-Tremblay for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So you explained a little bit what was the future agenda. So the next meetings of WTO, what's going to be put forward, the ministerial conference, but what is the concrete plan of action of Canada at each of those stages under that issue of the waiver? I'm not talking about the position of Canada per se, which you answered, but the plan of action in the short term.
The plan of action with respect to the waiver in the short term, there will be a meeting on Monday, an informal TRIPS Council meeting, where it'll be the first time that this new proposal is presented to the TRIPS Council. We expect that the proponents will walk us through the proposal, and there will be an opportunity for questions and explanations. And then we will meet again more formally on the 8th and 9th of June to discuss further, all with a view to reporting to the General Counsel. So there will be an ongoing dialogue, and that dialogue is happening very soon as Monday. The conversation will start, and the membership will pick this issue up.
Did you feel that the change of position of the U.S. was a catalyst, or could we even say a turning point in the way that the different countries around the world have approached this issue?
I think that's hard to say. I can't really get into the minds of other members. I would say this: there is a new proposal on the table. It might be as a result of the U.S. action. But I would also say that the new proposal doesn't seem particularly narrower than the former proposal. So I'm not sure if the proponents think that they're closer or further from building consensus because of the U.S. action. And it's not at all clear how the U.S. intends to engage. We had initially thought, I think many of us thought that the U.S. may be putting a proposal on the table. It's not clear that that will actually be the case. So it's not clear to us here in Geneva exactly how this will move forward or what the impact will be. I suppose the meeting on the 31st might inform us to a certain extent.
Thank you. And concerning the positions of certain Western countries, which, when President Biden announced the position of the U.S., that of being in favor of the waiver, there are certain countries which show themselves to be rather ambivalent, if I'm not mistaken, including France. So I imagine that these countries that you're currently discussing with them actively. Did you feel any change on their part? Are they starting to put aside their fears and starting to change their approach in those countries?
Well, France is a bit complicated because France actually doesn't speak at the WTO. The EU does on their behalf. But let me say this. Some of the issues that France raised are the very issues that we have been discussing in the context of the Ottawa Group. France has said there are other issues, not just intellectual property, that are impeding the manufacturing of vaccines, that are getting in the way, supply chains, for example, customs issues. And so I think that's partly where France was coming from. But I think it's important to note that no country has ever said that they were opposed to the waiver, and this has been discussed since October in the TRIPS Council and has gone to the General Council a number of times now. And the discussions have continued. So there may be varying degrees of support for this, and there may be more questions from some members than others, but no one has actually said we are opposed to the waiver. I do understand that in the media there seems to be this sense that some countries are opposed, but in the WTO context, no one has come out directly opposed to the waiver.
Thank you very much. On to Mr. Green for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you. And we keep hearing this. We keep hearing how you're not opposed, and yet, you know, you're not supporting the text-based negotiations. You've put out 8 questions along with Australia and Chile and Mexico, but these questions reportedly have been answered in detail, most notably in document IP/C/W/673S. Would you care to comment on that? Like, it's one thing to say you're not opposing it, but if you're not actually getting to the table on the text-based negotiations, you're stalling it, and stalling it is by virtue opposing it.
Well, there's a couple of things I could say. The one is that the responses we received were more of a historical nature. The questions that we have were about how this particular waiver would work in this particular context. A lot of the comparisons are made to HIV medicines, which are very, very different than vaccines against COVID-19. So the questions themselves don't lend themselves to talking about what happened in the past. We need to be thinking about what is the potential for this into the future. So it's important to ask these questions.
If we could, through you, Madam Chair, to the ambassador, respectfully, if Canada feels that the TRIPS waiver isn't necessary, fine. But I don't understand how you have a moral imperative to block other countries from applying for it. So how do you respond to other members from this committee that even if Canada doesn't want to make the application, that you're going to continue to drag your heels and allowing other countries to do so?
I'm at a loss to understand how Canada is blocking this discussion. We have been engaged in this discussion since October. There is only a proposal. There is not text on the table. Canada has in good faith asked questions as to how this waiver would operate. I have met with the proponents a number of times to discuss this waiver. This is a consensus organization. Canada does not have the ability to block, but Canada will be looking for the best outcome in order to increase vaccine production. And the waiver may be one of those tools, but Canada is not blocking that discussion.
Madam Chair, through you, is the ambassador briefed on the potential threat has been raised today of mutant variants potentially in 6 to 8 months, making current vaccines, rendering them useless, essentially, if we don't get to a place where we have significant increased capacity in production and distribution globally for vaccines. Has the ambassador been briefed on that threat of the mutant variants kind of making our work to date useless potentially? I don't believe that there's a translation need at the moment. So this is through you to the ambassador. Is the ambassador briefed?
We are very aware that we need to increase vaccine production very, very quickly. And we're aware that there are health issues associated with variants. The question is, how do we go about doing that in the best way possible?
I don't know. I'm going to end off with a comment. I think that it's morally unconscionable that we're still in this position on this particular case. If it's a big deal, then we should waive it. If it's not a big deal, then we should waive it, and we should allow other countries to pursue it. And at this point, you know, quite frankly, it's embarrassing that we're at this point as a country, given the risks that are in place here globally, and the fact that mutant variants can come back and essentially, render the work to date useless. And so I'm just going to say that on the record here on this committee, that I think we have a moral imperative and a duty to get out of the way and allow any and all opportunities for the increased global production. I would hate to be involved in a government that would support a vaccine apartheid in this regard. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. On to Mr. Lobb for the remaining 4 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and I'd like to welcome all our guests. And I'd just like to let all the committee know that Mr. DeBoer is Ambassador DeBoer is one of Huron County's proudest citizens. And so he grew up down the road from where I live, and we actually had 3 ambassadors from Huron County. So we're well represented and very proud. And I know that Mr. Green was not disparaging Mr. DeBoer or any of our guests here today. My question is pretty simple. And it's in regards to the fact that it appears that all the major pharmaceutical companies at this point in time have accumulated all the raw materials that go into these vaccines, whether it's the vials, the bags, whether it's the bacterias, they have everything. So even if the TRIPS is approved or whatever happens, is there even a chance that there's going to be any material to produce vaccines in another country or another part of the world?
Well, having given me that great introduction, I'm not sure that I'm able to answer that question. I would say this, however, that one of the reasons for the Ottawa Group proposal is to ensure that those types of things hopefully will not happen, and that through trade facilitation, through the relaxation of customs, custom duties, tariffs, and also export restrictions, that these goods would flow much easier. But I don't know whether any of my other colleagues who were here can speak more to that particular issue.
Okay, the only last question I'd have for you is basically the meeting of your councils on June 8th and 9th, I believe. And I was just wondering if you could just give us a brief enlightenment as to what you think will happen there, or what might happen, or go from there.
It's hard to say. The first meeting will be on Monday, so we'll have a much better sense of where members are. We'll have a much better sense of the proponents as to how they wish to move forward, and to have others engage on their proposal. Typically, what would happen is that a report would go to the General Counsel, and that would either be the waiver itself or a report that says that we need to do more work. Given the time, I would imagine that we will be going to General Counsel, which is the overall governing body of the WTO, to say we need more time to discuss this issue. This is a complicated issue for the membership.
Is there any more time, Ms. Chair?
You have 57 seconds.
Ms. Gray, would you like to take the rest of the time there?
Very quickly, I want one more member to try to get in for the remaining minutes. So now it's down to 47 seconds.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll just be really quick, and back to the ambassador. So you had said that there was questions that were answered, but they were more historical. Do you anticipate receiving other answers, that actually specifically address your questions? And if so, would you be able to table those to the committee, what your questions were, and then if you receive additional answering to your questions?
A brief answer, Sir Ambassador.
I don't think we're anticipating further questions. We'll put questions on the floor on the 31st.
Okay, thank you very much. On to Mr. Sarai for the remaining 2 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Didn't think I had the time, so I'm going to be I'll be quick. I'm going to ask His Excellency, can you advise us on what are the next steps and what are timelines in order to either make a decision on this TRIPS waiver or help those countries that are struggling in this regards? What would you see as the next steps that Canada can assist in getting either the COVAX initiative further ahead, as it's been kind of stumbling, or this TRIPS initiative to fruition?
It's hard to say. I can't look into a crystal ball, but I would note this, that on the narrow issue of intellectual property, typically these matters are supposed to, is 90 days, and then if it's not resolved, the issue is over, but we continue to extend that to allow this conversation to carry forward. But I also want to be very clear that the intellectual property aspect of vaccine production and addressing COVID-19 is only one narrow part of a very important but narrow part of the WTO work. And so we would see this happening in a number of tracks, including on trade facilitation, on the removal of export restrictions. And we would also see it moving in tracks that are outside of the World Trade Organization. So at the WHO and COVAX and these other mechanisms for getting vaccines to other populations.
And if TRIPS waiver was done, is there enough global capacity to create more vaccines rapidly and quickly if they were able to procure the ingredients and get the appropriate licensing and approvals?
That is not at all clear. The Director General met with manufacturers on April 14th. I was part of that meeting, and what we heard from manufacturers was a real issue around increasing manufacturing capacity and actually finding the facilities to manufacture the vaccines, and then also finding the technical expertise to assist in the production, because it's a difficult and complicated process for developing and manufacturing these vaccines. So it's not at all clear how quickly that could be ramped up. It's quite unfortunate, but that seems to be a real problem.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, Mr. Burrell, and to the other witnesses, and our apologies for the short amount of time, but you know how the committee works. So thank you to all of our committee members. So I will move adjournment of the meeting. This is Friday. Have a wonderful weekend and enjoy hopefully some sunshine. So thank you again to all our witnesses. I move adjournment. Thank you.
Thank you.